And start that now. Yeah, so just again, thank you guys for being here. Thank you for joining us for this informative panel as part of our last day of the third annual Pierce County Affordable Housing Week. On behalf of the Tacoma-Pierce County Affordable Housing Consortium, I'd love to welcome you today to our panel. Our panel today is called The Market Matters, Rethinking Market Rate Housing in Pierce County. And our virtual event today is sponsored by Umpqua Bank, Spinnaker Property Management, SMR Architects, the Black Home Initiative, and the City of Tacoma. We'd also like to extend a special thank you to our housing champion, Tacoma Housing Authority, for their support throughout the week with the events and celebration. I'd also like to start out with a land acknowledgement. We gratefully honor and acknowledge that we rest on the traditional lands of the Puyallup people. They have been here throughout time and are still here today, thriving in their community. This acknowledgement is a step towards true allyship as we continue to uplift Indigenous voices and reflect on the histories of dispossession. Let us maintain dedication to the cause of social justice for Indigenous populations. And I do just want to thank everyone who has participated in and supported Affordable Housing Week. Throughout this week's panels, we've discussed the range of housing options available from emergency shelters to home ownership. We've highlighted various types of affordable housing, the community stakeholders involved in those types of housing, and the local needs for the housing options. And through these conversations, we've challenged our viewers, ourselves, to expand our understanding of what home means and the diverse paths that people take to get there. And I hope this week has given you something to take forward, but we still have one more important panel for this week. So for this panel, it's going to be a pretty loosey-goosey conversation panel style. I'm going to briefly introduce our three panelists, and then I'm going to let them each have an opportunity to talk a little bit more about their work. Feel free to throw your questions in the chat along the way. Raise your hand. Our panelists seem to be open to being interrupted, so let's just have a conversation. Feel free to throw your comments and questions out there freely. And now, really quickly, let me introduce myself and the organization that I represent. My name is Cathy Twiggs, and I'll be your host for today. The Affordable Housing Consortium is a nonprofit membership-based agency that provides public education, advocacy, and support for the expansion of affordable housing throughout Pierce County. One way that we do this is by sharing information with the public on the need for affordable housing, by hosting virtual discussions such as this one, sharing information with the public on the needs and local funding and policies. We also advocate at the state and local level for policies and funding that support the creation of more affordable housing throughout Pierce County. The consortium is committed to advancing and advocating the support and expansion for affordable housing, with 75 dedicated members ranging from housing developers to individual advocates, and we work tirelessly to foster communities where everyone has access to safe and affordable homes. And for today's discussion, we're focusing on market rate housing. Market rate housing meets the needs of households earning above 120 AMI and plays an important role in supporting movement across the housing continuum. Without enough supply, higher income households often occupy units meant for lower income earners, worsening affordability for others. Market rate development also creates opportunities for mixed income communities. In Tacoma and Pierce County, developers like Coase and Rush companies are building market rate and mixed income housing, as well as many others, to meet this growing demand. And to put it in perspective, the estimated need for market rate units is about 27,199 units for households above 120% AMI by 2044. And so for our panel today, our esteemed panelists, we have Cathy Reines, President and CEO of Coase Development, Dominique Remy, co-founder of OneDrop, and Kevin Ramsey, Associate Principal at BERK Consulting. Thank you guys for being here, bringing your expertise to the table. Cathy, I'd like to start with you and just hear a little bit more about your role, what COES is doing in the community, and um, yeah, can we hear from you?
Thank you, Casey. It's a pleasure to be here. Honored to be asked to participate in the program today. Coast Development is a workforce housing developer and have been since we opened our doors 11 years ago. We developed specifically for the missing middle. So we develop for the 60 to 80% area median income resident. We are just starting our 29th project all throughout the Pacific Northwest, but specifically breaking ground on our fourth project in Pierce County this summer, 226 units to be located out across the street from Tacoma Community College in the James Center North area. And that project will deliver in about 20 months. And looking forward to doing that. That will be 643 units for us specifically in the Pierce County market. And it's a market that we are proud to be in for many, many reasons, but definitely just being able to provide workforce housing, missing middle in the Pierce County market has been very rewarding.
Absolutely. Thank you for um, bringing that expertise and bringing that into Pierce County. We really appreciate it.
Of course.
So we will move to, let's go to Dom. Would you like to talk about OneDrop and what OneDrop is doing for people that don't know?
Yeah, thanks, Casey, for inviting myself to be on the panel. Everybody can hear me all right?
Yep.
Well, fantastic. And just a big thank you for all the work that you guys have done regarding the Affordable Housing Week here, Pierce County. Just some fantastic events thus far. And I'm really excited to be able to share a little bit of background regarding myself and then OneDrop and what we're trying to do. I'm born and raised, I was born on base at JBLM, grew up in Lakewood, and blessed. My dad's a real estate developer. He's been developing for over 35 years at this point. And For a long time, I tried to not go down the real estate development path. I actually had a 15-year career in tech, and I most recently worked at Facebook on news feed and artificial intelligence. But about 15 years ago, I bought my first house and I realized what the potential is regarding home ownership and regarding development. And I started off first off with doing house hacking and living in doing like FHA 203K and some of that stuff. And slowly over time and on the side, it became my hobby where I did everything from ADUs and flips to finally new construction and ground up. Um, I currently have built 146 units since I pivoted and left Facebook and tech. And last year, my dad, who I work with, we have separate real estate development companies, but we'll partner on some projects. My dad, myself, and another developer of color, Reggie Brown, who is active building in a lot of the missing middle housing here in the Pierce County region, decided to co-found an organization that we are calling OneDrop. OneDrop stands for, and actually, if it's okay, I'd love to just screen share a few different items, and I'll keep it quick. Um, but These are us as co-founders for this work. And the three of us, we are all separate real estate developers. We build oftentimes our own projects, but oftentimes we'll work on developing projects together. Our general saying is we all kind of build for all wages, all stages, and all ages. That is something that's really critical and important to us. And even in this photo, this is a 63 unit senior housing community that we partnered on that particular year. Um, And we've done everything from also, single room occupancy, transitional housing for nonprofits in our community, to for sale housing, to podium style, to you name it. Uh, we a year ago, like literally a year ago, it was May 7th last year. I just finished building essentially 174 units. Um, uh, and we're at the process where we're starting to ask ourselves some really critical and deep and important questions around what did we want to be different about the impact that we were having in community. Because for a lot of it, we have been very focused on being heads down and just trying to build what was in front of us. But at the same time, privately, we sit on a number of boards. We have, volunteer. I think Claude has a scholarship, and we just continue to ask the question of how and in what ways can we be more intentional about the impact that we're making. And we realize that there is a number of aspiring emerging developers of color who are still trying to get their foothold in the space and trying to figure out how to be able to make this a career path. And we asked ourselves the question, instead of us just doing what was necessary to build our own businesses in order to make sure our own businesses were successful, uh, could we effectively instead try to help build those businesses as well? And so that led to One Drop. It stands for Diverse Developers Real Estate Opportunity Partnership. It is a collective of real estate developers of color. We have 20 members, and they are at all levels, from aspiring to emerging to established. And our mission is to support the growth of developers of color to expand housing in the Puget Sound. Why is that important? Based on the Breaking the Glass Bottlenecks study by the Grove Report, today Black developers only represent 0.4% of the industry nationally, and Hispanic developers only represent 0.1% of the industry nationally. And so what that means is that historically, we as people of color have had little to no say in the planning, design, and building of our communities. And we know the saying, right? If you're not at the table, you're likely on the menu. And unfortunately, we as people of color have been on the menu for a long period of time, as we all very much and well know. And so we ultimately decided to set a goal. Our goal is to change that. We want to support developers of color building 1% of the housing needed in the Puget Sound this decade. And we have a need of about 275,000 housing units by 2030 across King County, Pierce County, and Snohomish. And so our hope is that we can support developers of color to build out nearly 3,000 units over the course of the next 5 years. And in doing so, create over $1 billion of economic activity and impact within our communities, which would be, unprecedented historically. So that's a little bit about One Drop. There's a lot more. I'm always happy to talk quite a bit more about that. We're really excited about this work. The last thing I will note is that we've been doing this work for 5+ years, but we just did it in silence and we didn't think anybody really cared about it. And it's really only in the last year that when we started sharing the work that we're doing with the Black Home Initiative, who I'm really glad to say is a sponsor, of this week, and I sit on the BHI core team. They specifically said, "Holy moly, we got to figure out how you guys actually can operationalize and start doing this at scale." So we currently provide mentorship, apprenticeship, and co-development support to developers of color. And we also provide shared services and resources. So everything from balancing dirt from one job site to the next, to co-buying materials, to providing access to all of our templates, tools, and functions. We make that happen in order to ensure more of us are successful and resilient in the long run.
Thank you so much for that. And yeah, and thanks for coming out of silence. We need to hear from you, and I'm so glad that you are out there and advocating for what you're doing, because yeah, you know that it's a need. We all know it's a need, and I'm glad that community partners are stepping up to help amplify what you're doing. BHI is a great organization that we partner with often, and we try to stay in line with what they're doing. Seattle's just a bigger area than we are, so we that little sister syndrome, I guess. But thank you so much. I wanted to expand a little bit before we move on. Just can you explain a little bit, how does OneDrop find projects? Or on the other side, if people want to bring a project to you, what are their qualifications? What are you guys looking for in partnership? And what does that process look for you and OneDrop for anybody in the room that might be interested?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, and that's finding available, land and or opportunities to partner on development is always a challenge and is something that we are always open ears to. We would ask that people reach out to me directly at dom@onedrop.co. I operate as our executive director, or to our broader, I'll put it in the chat as well, our general inbox that we have, hey@onedrop.co. And then internally we have a members portal for all of our developers, and we have a really active chat thread where as new opportunities come through, we share that internally with our group in order to be able to make it so that all of us have the ability to take a look at what's available. And we also have good conversations internally about like who has the capacity, right? To be able to take on those particular projects or that particular lot. We like to find, luckily HB 1110 is actually doing quite a bit to be able to help out some of the development that many of us want to do. But generally speaking, we look for what a lot of developers look for on the whole, right? We want to see large lots that are zoned correctly, ideally aren't brownfields, right? Would love for them to be flat. They can't always get that out here, right, in the Puget Sound region. And more importantly, though, it is really important that we lift up our developers of color to be able to participate on different projects with different organizations. And so whether it be joining committees, joining boards, just ensuring that there's representative voice from our community is a really big and helpful thing. And so one last thing I felt like I should share, sorry, just because I realized that I should probably put it up on screen, is we are just really blessed to have just amazing members throughout the region. We have developers everywhere from Puyallup to Seattle. And so and for some reason Zoom is freaking out on me and I don't know if I'm gonna be able to screen share again. So so we'll see if I get a chance. I'd love to make sure I'll put a link in the chat of where people can see the names of our developer members.
Yeah. Sorry, I tried to open it up. It might work now, but if not, we can try in a little bit. Yeah. Well, thank you for that. And I think moving on a little bit to hearing from Kevin, I think so Kevin works for BERK Consulting and worked on the housing needs assessment. And so I think we'll hear a little bit about that from Kevin. Tell us a little bit about what BERK does, who BERK works with in Pierce County, and what does your work look like around the housing assessments?
Yeah, hi, and thanks for having us here. So I work with BERK Consulting, which is a public policy consulting firm based in Seattle. We've been around for about 35 years now, and we work with state and local governments all across Washington state on a wide range of issues, including housing policy, and I lead a lot of our housing work here. Over the years, we've done quite a bit of work in Pierce County. Back in 2018 or so, I worked on the Tacoma Affordable Housing Action Strategy, which is they're still working to implement a lot of those recommendations years later. We worked with Pierce County on a housing action strategy in 2022, and that included a pretty in-depth housing needs assessment that Casey referred to. And that basically means analyzing data, understand who are the residents of Pierce County, what are their incomes, what type of housing demand are we seeing, how are the housing needs that we're seeing among the population, how's that lining up with what the housing system is providing, both market rate and affordable housing together. you know, where is it working, and where are there kind of gaps in what type of housing needs are being met, and what are some strategies that local jurisdictions can consider to address those gaps. So yeah, so we've worked across both, looking at ways to make market rate housing more diverse and more affordable at more income levels. I'd correct one thing Casey said, where you mentioned, you know, market rate is aimed at only 120% of median income and above. Like I'd say no, you know, yes, a lot of the housing is built there, but that's the problem, and that, you know, you can make a lot of market rate housing at affordable at lower levels if you diversify the types of housing that you make. And I think both Cathy and Dom have been talking about those types of projects. So I want to make sure people understand that market rate housing is, you know, has potential to meet needs, you know, obviously not at the very low end of the income spectrum, and that's why we have affordable housing. But there are opportunities to kind of diversify what the marketplace can provide, and what type of needs it can meet, because there just isn't enough resources to meet all those lower and moderate income housing needs through subsidies and those types of programs.
Thank you for that. Yeah, and you're right. You're very right. And I think that the diversification of options for people, and I think the missing middle conversation is really interesting, because there are a lot of people that don't want a single family home, or that doesn't make sense for them, or that's not everybody's end goal is home ownership even, or single family home. That's just the reality of the diversifying ideas that people have. So I appreciate you saying that, because that adds into the conversation of what we've been talking about all week, is the housing continuum. And it is a continuum, and it doesn't mean that the end goal is always the same. And it doesn't mean that it's always one group of people looking for one type of housing. So I appreciate that you saying that, because housing and the conversations that we're having are so complex that you can't really talk about them in a binary. So I appreciate you highlighting that. And we've mentioned the missing middle. We've talked about middle housing. I would like to go into that. I know most people in the room probably know what that means, but for some that may not know what missing middle is, what missing or middle housing is, and how HB 1110 seeks to address that. I don't know if anybody wants to go into that, Kevin or Dom or Cathy.
I could start. Missing middle refers to the type of gap that you see in a lot of communities between the low density detached single family home product and then like large apartment buildings. And in some places there's a big gap between there isn't really a lot of options between. So either you can afford to, you know, one day buy a single family home, or you're living in a big apartment building and there isn't a lot of diversity, the way Casey was talking about before, of options in between. So missing middle tries to fill that gap, and there's been a lot of efforts over the years to try to that jurisdictions around Pierce County and the rest of the state have used to try to increase the amount of options available, such as townhomes, such as, you know, smaller garden style apartment buildings, such as accessory dwelling units and backyards, you know, different cottage housing, right? There's lots of different ways to have more kind of in between options, including ownership options as well as rental, to kind of meet those needs in between, the large apartment buildings and the single family homes. And but it's slow going, making those types of changes. One big resistance is neighbors currently living in their single family homes, thinking that they don't want more density in their neighborhood. And it makes it really hard for jurisdictions to make the type of zoning changes necessary and the type of, to encourage that type of housing. So the state, in this last legislative session, or in a previous one, sorry, not the last one, passed HB 1110, which was mentioned. The state legislature passed this, and it basically required cities of a certain size to allow up to a certain number of units on every lot in the state. So it didn't have to do with like units per acre or anything like that. It was just that if you're over a certain size, every lot in your community can be allowed 2 units of housing instead of just one. You can't zone it to only allow for a single family home. In the larger communities, it was 4 units per lot. And if you're around, high capacity transit, or you're offering affordability requirements on it, you can get up to 6 in some areas. So it's a new requirement from the state, and it doesn't apply to everyone. It applies to a lot of cities in the Pierce County area. And all the cities right now are in the process of kind of implementing changes to their development code and their zoning to allow for this. And that's going to create a lot, new types of opportunities to provide new types of homes in these areas. And I'm sure Cathy and Dom could describe that in more detail.
Yeah, I would love to pop back over to Cathy and see what Coase is experiencing throughout Pierce County on that front, and kind of what is the state of, if you can speak to it, the state of market housing and mixed housing that you guys do. What are you seeing?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's a critical need really in most of the communities that we serve currently, right? It's that for us, it's really that 50 to 80% area median income. And historically, there have been few developers that have really focused on really that segment of our population. And so they had very few alternatives, right? They either had to have roommates, or they had to continue living with their families, or living in their cars, or there was just so few, it's so little supply provided for that specific income level. And for us, we do density, right? So we provide apartment complexes. And we believe that there's a lot of different ways to solve this issue, including DOM solution. We think every solution is critical, right? Every different housing type in this 50 to 80% AMI is really, really important. And so for us, specifically, we have a project up in the Hilltop. 161 units. It opened during the pandemic in 2021. And we've done a survey of those residents every year since we've opened the building. And here's what we've learned from that survey. I'll just share this year's results. So this is the 2025 survey. 69% of those residents didn't have a cheaper or equivalent housing option, specifically in the Hilltop, which is, as we've learned over time, for a number of them, where they grew up and they wanted to return back to their neighborhood. But 16% of them stated that they would have been homeless if not for the affordable housing option that we were providing. 16% would have been living with family, 22% would have been living somewhere with higher rents, and then the 25% would have been living somewhere less desirable. And I think, that probably those same percentages probably apply across all housing types. And what we've learned by providing housing to this missing middle, and we have lots of statistics to share, but it's allowed them to dream. And that is, I think, for us, the most meaningful statement that we can make. So now we've provided them security, we've provided them housing so they don't have to worry about whether they were going to be evicted, or where they were going to put their head at night, or a roommate that was disruptive to their lives. And now they can start dreaming. And we've seen that through the surveys that we've done over the past few years. Just in the results, we've seen how this housing has changed has changed their lives. And again, I could go into a lot of detail, but I think for us, that's what this housing provides to the communities. And we are fortunate in that we partner with social impact funds who share our mission and vision and very committed to ensuring that we can continue to provide housing. They not only committed, they mandate that we provide housing at this level so that the communities as a whole can benefit. And so, I think for us, that's the importance of this serving this demographic and this population. So, not sure I answered the question, but it's my
You absolutely did. You absolutely did. And I appreciate you talking about the sense of hope and to take it all the way back to last year's Affordable Housing Week. We were talking about throughout these panels last year, we were talking about other sectors that are connected to housing. And we had each day it was different. We had public health, transportation. I mean, public health is a huge, if you Housing First explains how that is possible. I mean, if you don't have a secure roof over your head, a safe, secure, decent, living situation, it exasperates health, mental health, physical health, job barriers, productivity, and all of those things are attached. And it extends past just one individual, or one couple or one family, because it's intergenerational. And children in K through 12 experiencing homelessness, and the continuum of homelessness, what that means, how being housing insecure is such a it's a diverse term, I suppose, to say that. Housing insecurity can look like so many things, even in between from one secure housing, one house to a next, or one apartment to the next. That in between, the market is so expensive right now that some people are housing insecure in between housing. And so thinking about the continuum, thinking about the public health implications. I mean, we're all hitting the nail on the head, and I can tell that everybody in this room is on board with that complex understanding of housing need. And I just appreciate that you are focused on that, and appreciate you mentioning that. And Dom, did you want to talk anything about a little bit about the missing middle? You brought it up, and so I don't want to make you reiterate what you already said, but looked like
Yeah,
you might have.
no, I think just we're really excited. I mean, it's worth noting that missing middle is not it's called missing middle because it is missing today, but it's not a thing that has been missing historically. Historically, I told a friend the other day ago, like, even though the song YMCA talks about group homes, and single room occupancy, like this is actually like kind of foundational to the character of America, but also on like so many other elements of housing policy. It is also tied to some of America's like deepest and darkest pain points as well, right? And so we know that single family zoning was originated out of Berkeley, California, and was originated with the intent specifically of ensuring that people that were low income and or people of color were not able to access certain neighborhoods. And so the vast majority of the housing that we term missing middle today was intentional that over time that we excluded that. And so it really is, we should be really proud of ourselves as a community for like reopening our arms and re-inviting this type of housing back into our communities, because it's actually part of us getting over our historical humps that we are, still working on today. The second thing I'll note is beyond being a big proponent for missing middle, and I may steal your thunder here, so let me know if I'm jumping too far ahead. Is on the policy side. There are specific policy proposals that Our One Drop members have worked together to try to propose that. We're really excited that the governor has included in his Housing 2025 vision. Specifically, for those who go and look into this, it's called pre-designed base plans. And our hope is essentially to do a follow-up bill to HB 1110 that actually would say it's not enough just for us to change the zoning. We also have to make the ability to get missing middle housing more quickly available, actually like on the streets. And so what we would like to see and what we're hoping will be a part of that work. And I know Nick Carr was actually had a chance to speak about this at the Monday meeting for those that were able to attend, amongst a number of other policy proposals, but was the idea that each jurisdiction that currently is required to have the missing middle implementations would also be required to have a minimum of 3 variations for 3 units, 4 units, 5 units, and 6-unit housing that would be essentially available off the shelf in order to be able to ensure that we can more quickly go from lot to housing. Similar like what we've seen in terms of the pre-designed base plans for ADUs out of Seattle. That's our hope. We're going to be working really hard on trying to get that passed. We believe that the way in which we can actually, if we can, right now, we are still way too significantly incentivized to build really large mega mansions. And the more we can reduce some of the friction and pain points around building missing middle housing, the more we can ensure that everybody has a roof over their head. The more that we can increase the amount of home ownership that exists within our community, which is so critically important.
I could jump on that. I think that's a great example that Dom's talking about there. And, part of the bigger challenge that I think is behind that proposal is the fact that you can require missing middle in lots of different communities, but every community's got their own differences in terms of development regulations and building codes and things. So like different setbacks and different height requirements and where the roof can be and what the facade needs to be. Like when you have all these different requirements in different communities, it's hard for a developer, a small developer to go in and like you have to, do a lot of customization to kind of make it fit for this particular place. And then it's harder to take that design to another community. And this idea of having some pre-approved off the shelf designs that you don't have to go through the design review, you don't have to kind of customize it to the local stuff, it's going to work. That saves so much time for a developer that can make, it can make the permitting process faster and it could reduce their costs in terms of the architecture and whatnot. So it's a great idea that I hope does get adopted.
Wonderful. Yeah, thank you for that. And I just want to remind everyone in the room, please don't let me talk over or ask too many questions. This is y'all's time to ask questions or give comments too, or just kind of interact with our panelists if you'd like. You can throw your questions or comments in the chat or just take yourself off mute or raise your hand or anything like that, but we'll keep going. Yeah, so to that point, the missing middle and, there are, if anybody was at the roundtable discussion last night with Executive Mello, who was very focused on housing, very focused on equitable housing and addressing that in Pierce County. But Pierce County has more than just the city of Tacoma, city of Tacoma is pretty progressive and housing forward. And as you can see, I live in Hilltop and they're everywhere. Greater Christ Temple Church, I live right next to it, and they're about to break ground on the senior affordable right behind me. So it's going on everywhere in Tacoma. But what we were talking about last night a little bit was some of the other jurisdictions in Pierce County that really do need middle housing. They need to work towards their housing allocated requirements, given to them by the state. But they're in Executive Mello's words are very creative in how they try to get in the way with it, or try to not open that up. So I'm wondering to our panelists, how do you guys navigate that? And if it's we can't touch it yet, then that's what we need to know too. I mean, Is it who the partners are? Is it getting more involved, like the consortium? Can we get more involved in advocacy and trying to break through that barrier on a policy level? Or yeah, I want to see what you guys have to say about some jurisdictions that are a little bit resistant. Cathy, you look like you're about to say something.
Did I? I was thinking I looked like I was not going to say anything.
Well, you don't have to. I know that this is a
Um,
conversation that lots of us have, and it's a tricky one,
It
it's a
is.
tricky one.
I think in this, at least for a multifamily developer in this environment right now, it is really difficult to make projects pencil. And I mean, everything sort of it works against us, right? And so, and there's very few multifamily projects being done right now for that reason, and really that reason alone. People cannot make the numbers work. And so I think what ends up happening is we have to look at those municipalities that provide us the path of least resistance, because every dollar counts. And so I would say for us, we've looked in other municipalities outside of Tacoma and in Pierce County, and we had a very, very difficult time making the numbers work for the reasons that you mentioned. It just wasn't as welcoming as Tacoma is. And so, and we look forward to that day. We think, you know, workforce affordable housing could be successful in really and is needed in every municipality, whether that's single family, multifamily, whatever the supply need is, but it's just difficult in some of the other municipalities that we've looked at historically.
Yeah, I think what you're, oh, go ahead, Doc.
Okay, go ahead, Kevin.
Okay. The problem you're describing is exactly why the state legislature has been working over the last several years on several different bills to kind of standardize or kind of put in some minimal requirements for jurisdictions in terms of what they can allow, what they should be allowing for housing, and to try to remove some barriers, such as design review and, even like things like parking, parking requirements, right? There, obviously minimum densities in terms of the middle housing and now the TOD bill. There's been a lot of work to try to help nudge those jurisdictions that are having a little bit of trouble getting there on their own, because just the local politics are make it really difficult when you have a very, your local, the folks that are there, like it the way it is now. So it's really hard to get elected officials to take changes. So that the state stepping in has been really helpful. But I think as Dom pointed out, it's not necessarily enough, and you can still have a lot of unique barriers in your jurisdiction, even while you're, complying with the new state regulations to the letter of the law, and additional things like, off the shelf, pre-designed plans, that sort of thing, are ways that if you're really trying to not just allow for, but encourage, the housing production to happen and new housing types to occur, some more effort to kind of level the playing field and provide more standards can go a long way.
Thank you for that.
Spot on. Yeah. And I would add, I think, I do agree, right? Well, with Cathy, right? That, water flows, easiest in the path, the least resistance. And so I think that's a reality. I think also at this time that we have been equipped more, maybe now more than ever, with more data and evidence of why it actually does matter for this housing to be built across all communities. I think about a few things. One is the fact that if I remember correctly, over the last 4 years, we've seen a 50% increase in the cost of rent across our community, right? We're talking about the largest line item on their budget, scaling in a way exponentially past the growth of their own wages. We talk about the fact that there's been a doubling of the cost of home ownership over the course of the last 4 years. And when I get a chance to speak with people at all different income levels, but even especially people who are at the highest of income levels, even they acknowledge that their own kids aren't able to live in the same communities as themselves. Being able to, I think, have the correct emotional appeal is and the data to boot, I think, has been incredibly helpful in helping to, change and open eyes around the reality of it. But I think it goes beyond on the homeowner or the tenant side. And there's an argument that can be made to the actual jurisdictions about effectively the missed tax revenue that they are missing out on by there not being additional housing in their communities, that fundamentally impacts their ability to serve their residents to date. There was a study done. I'm really excited to see that this has also been a part of the governor's broader policy aims, but by Peter Calthorpe regarding grand boulevards. And one of the things that it showed was that if we were to rezone existing commercial corridors, you essentially have, and I want to make sure I quote this correctly, so I have brought it up here. You guys can't see it. I'm happy to send it out to others who are interested. But the redevelopment potential across existing commercial corridors, because of the fact that commercial is oftentimes assessed at a much lower value than residential is, means that we could see an average of 25 to 55x greater existing assessments in terms of value. So that means taking what are existing strip malls and some of the roads and streets right now, which are a little less desirable, such as South Tacoma Way or Pacific Ave, or and saying, how do we get more housing on places where there's already existing transit, where there's already existing infrastructure, and where we could effectively be adding the density necessary to really support those businesses, and in that process, change the overarching character and reality on the ground of what those spaces look like, and on top of that, significantly increase the revenue that the jurisdictions are able to bring in that process. So I think there's where my hope is we are beyond, if we can share the facts, right? We can get beyond the are we on the same page around this and get more to the how do we make this happen?
Yeah, and those are conversations that I've heard. I tracked the comprehensive plans throughout Pierce County and all the different jurisdictions, and went to a lot of community meetings where planners were talking to community about these plans. And the outcry, specifically, I'm thinking about it in Gig Harbor, where a lot of older people were coming to the meeting and they were just like, we don't need affordable house, we don't blah blah blah. And then I restructured the conversation into the markets and the wages and everything like that. Inflation is so high and continues to rise. If you're an older person and you're retired on a fixed income, Social Security, and that's not going up. We've got to think about keeping our generational households in the place that they want to be, our elderly people staying in the communities that they grew up in and worked in their careers. And so I try to, when I'm in those conversations, and I think this is kind of what we're talking about, is finding that common ground is so essential to changing the minds of residents, that also changes the minds and puts pressure on our elected officials that are in power with these conversations. So yeah, that's exactly what I have seen on the ground in community conversations. And the consortium is always available. Available is not maybe the word. We are very busy, especially Amanda. She is just all over the place, doing all of the things, but the consortium is always open to advocating at meetings or showing up to facilitate conversations to get people on the same page. We've got a really diverse membership that doesn't always agree on stuff, and that's the nature of community, and that's the nature of this type of work, working together. So we're getting towards the end of our panel today. I'm gonna open it up another moment for anybody in the room that's got questions or comments, or maybe you're in the room that wants to connect with one of our panelists for whatever reason. Chris looks like has something to say. Chris, do you want me to read it? I'm happy to read it, but if you want to take yourself off mute and ask yourself, you're more than welcome to. Yeah, so it's looking like what is the likelihood for reduced impact fees and development fees for developers in the near future? And are there any levers to push down development costs in this aspect?
This is a great question. And I would note, like, yeah, this is like, let's throw utility fees on top of that as well, right? Like, let's throw financing fees, which has also started to spiral. Let's throw insurance in this conversation, right? And I'm a big believer that part of the reason why everybody is trying to pull a penny out of every part of the stack of the transaction, it's because nobody's looking at it at the whole picture. And so it's inherent on us, I believe, to specifically uh, bring the whole picture to to the community and say, hey, you guys, how do we do something about this? I would love to see many more of our jurisdictions do, both fast tracking for affordable housing. And also want to name, really put more importantly, like, not just affordable housing, but mixed income housing. I'm a big believer that we can't just have housing where only low income people live in, that actually is long-term and negatively detrimental. We have seen that historically, and it's really, really important that inclusionary zoning and other elements of that nature are prioritized. Um, but this is a great example where AHC could be very well involved, is bringing together all those stakeholders and say, y'all, look, nearly $100,000 of a particular project per unit could just be tied up in all the fees that are associated with that project. And so everybody's going to need to be able to, take a bit of a haircut on this, or find a way to be able to get that valuation out of, like I said, the assessment and the property tax revenue that comes off that on the back end. But there definitely has to be a conversation about that. And I believe that the starting point for that is with affordable housing. So, but we need housing at all levels as well. And maybe one last thing I will note specifically about the housing at all levels, because I think it's I don't know if it's a radical point, but it is something that I don't mind emphasizing over and over again, is um, uh, we this is why it's actually so important, in my opinion, for us to be talking about up to 120% AMI, for us to be talking to up to 150% AMI, because when housing is becoming so expensive for everybody, we can't expect the middle class to constantly vote in favor of these items if they are also seeing relief and support. And I don't know if that conversation is had enough. But ultimately, I'm a big believer that we need to see relief at many different levels of the overarching housing process and stack. And unfortunately, with tariffs and with labor shortages and supply chain shortages, which are very imminent and are real, it's going to continue to put additional pressure on whether or not we can even meet the housing goals that we have. My understanding is that right now we are tracking to be about a third behind the housing we need within our community by the end of this decade, which is nearly 100,000 units short within the Puget Sound region. And that is scary because of the fact that more of what we are trying to fight is actually likely to continue to happen, even with all of the things that we've done thus far.
Thank you for saying that, and you're so right. And I think a lot of people in this room understand that as well. And I think that's why we're all here. It's to learn, it's to network, it's to try to figure out what to do. It's to be creative in our solutions, finding best practices as they come along, as new things present themselves, as new threats or um, insecurities with funding or, anything like that. We are a community of housing professionals and housing forward equity professionals that know why we're doing this work and know what the need is. And I think that we're in a really unique place in the country and in the world to be having these conversations. And these conversations are only gonna continue to get stronger as the market gets tougher. I really believe that. So on that note, we're going to end our panel. I want to thank our panelists for a really great discussion. Cathy, Kevin, and Dom, you guys have been a joy to have today on our last day of Affordable Housing Week. Chris, thank you for your questions. Thank you everybody for being here. And I just want to wrap up Affordable Housing Week by just thanking everyone for participating, whether you're in the room or not. It's been a joy to have these conversations for a second year in a row, with lots of the same people in the rooms and more people joining. So your willingness to show up and learn and offer insights around these topics is why we do this. So I hope you'll continue to learn and network with people in the housing sector and engage with these topics throughout the year. You'll be hearing from the consortium all the time. So I'm going to throw a couple of links in the chat to end us off. Our YouTube page it doesn't have them yet. We are going to post all of the recordings for all of the panels all week so that you can go rewatch them if you want. Share them, please share them for people that might need to listen. And if you want to contact us, you want to contact the consortium, get in touch with us, have us connect you with anybody within our network. That's what we do. We are connectors. So please email us. And if any of Dom, your email is in the chat, but if Kevin and Cathy want to throw theirs in there as well, feel free. Otherwise, you can contact me and I can connect you. But this has been a great discussion, and I really appreciate you guys for being here. Thank you, Kevin. And yeah, we're going to end on that note, and I hope to see you guys very soon. I appreciate you for being here, your expertise in the work that you do.
Thanks so much again for hosting. Bye, everyone.
Thanks. Happy Friday.